Hello friends, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Danny and today we're going to talk about fantasy genre blends. This is not going to be the typical episode of fantasy genre blends where I talk about 5 books that I read and pick 5 more books for my TBR. That will come at a later date. But right now I just want to give you guys some recommendations. The good, the bad, and the for everybody is what I'm going to call it. So the good are going to be the books that I have absolutely loved that I think are fantastic and I would recommend, but I don't necessarily recommend them to everybody. So if you're hearing me describe the book and they have tropes or other items in the book that you really find fascinating and that you don't think would be something that would turn you off, then absolutely give them a try. But I'm also going to talk about the for everybody, which are going to be suggestions and recommendations that I think are going to fit a broader audience for that specific genre blend. Then I'm also going to talk about the bad. For each of the genre blends that I'm going to bring up, I'm going to tell you a book that I have absolutely hated and I'll tell you why, because maybe you have different preferences than me and you are going to really love a book that I have not. So that's how this is going to be set up: the good, the bad, and the for everybody. So with that, let's get started with a genre blend that I have really enjoyed and kind of dug into in this past year, and that is fantasy mystery. The good for this genre blend is going to be The Rook by Daniel O'Malley. And one of the reasons I'm saying that this is not for everybody is because this is a series, but I would recommend reading this as a standalone, which it's not really. There is going to be some things left unsaid at the end of this, but I do think that in most things, the ending of this is very satisfying. So that's why I'm saying that it's not for everybody, because I know that some people are completionists. They want to make sure that they complete the entire series, and you might read this and be interested to continue. I continued the second book and just really didn't enjoy it, so ended up DNFing the series. I didn't really enjoy where it went because this book is a fantasy mystery. I think the rest of the books, because the main mystery of this is solved in this first book, it lost some of its luster for me. If you haven't heard of The Rook, this follows our main character whose name is Mythony, and she wakes up at the very beginning of the book not in her body. So she is in the body of someone named Mythony, but she doesn't really know who Mythony is. And she has a note in her pocket essentially telling her to follow these instructions, that you're going to wake up, not know where you are, not know who you are, and if you follow these instructions, things will happen. And she has to make a decision to either figure out who this person really was, who Mythony, I think it was Mythony Thomas is the person's full name. She has to essentially press the big red button and say, yes, I want to take over this person's life and become who this person was, or I need to hit and run, and apparently they will have all of the resources that they need to start their life over, and they'll never know who Mythony Thomas is. And this is in the very beginning of the book, but they make the choice to figure out who Mythony Thomas actually was. And Mythony had an interesting life. Is involved in an organization called the Shike, yeah, I think it's the Shike. It's been a minute since I've read this, but anyway, they are a very top secret organization that does deal in the supernatural. I won't tell you more than that, but the storyline is essentially you trying to figure out, one, who Mythony is, who the Shike are, what they deal with, and there is some overarching mysteries as well that you're looking at. I thought it was very fun, very fascinating. I love the confusion of being in a body that's not yours, being in a situation where you know nothing about. It was very fun, very mysterious. I really enjoyed this one. The bad for this genre blend, if you guys have followed me for our podcast, Not Reading for Content, we read The Village Library Demon Hunting Society, which Leandra and I both did not enjoy. This is deemed a fantasy mystery. You are following our main character whose name is Sherry. If I remember her name, it's because I did not like her. But she is in a town where people are getting murdered at a very accelerated rate, and no one seems to care. And she starts asking questions. It seems like there's something happening in the town that's a little out of sorts. There is a talking cat in this who may or may not be a demon. And you're supposed to be solving why these people are murdered. Or there's a specific murder that happens at the very beginning of the book that is really what you're trying to solve, but you're also trying to solve the murder or the mystery of, you know, the rampant acceleration of murders in this town. And I just think it was dumb. I think the decisions that Sherry makes are not good. I don't think it's well written. I think that there's a lot of conveniences, and I would not recommend. But I also know a lot of people who've had a lot of fun with it. It doesn't take itself too seriously, so I'll say that it has that for it. But yeah, this one's not for me. The one that I'm gonna say is for everyone is one of my favorites, but I don't talk about it a lot, and I think it needs more limelight. This is The Stranger Times. I freaking love this series, and I need to get back to it. I've only read the first 2 books, but every time I get into it, I just love it. This is an urban fantasy mystery. We are at a news organization in this first book. They are called The Stranger Times, and they are kind of a tabloid in a lot of people's minds. They look into supernatural mysteries to actually figure out, are they supernatural, are they not? And you are following lots of different characters, but your main character is a woman who gets hired at the Stranger Times, and so you're kind of figuring things out with her. I love this cast of characters. It's a huge cast. I'm pretty sure the audiobook has multiple people narrating, and they're just so fun. It's absolutely phenomenal how I can visualize each of these characters. And it's not I've already said that. I was gonna say it's not a small cast, but they each have their own personalities. They're like a little family. They have their issues with each other. They each have their little quirks, and the supernatural element or the supernatural mysteries on top of all of their kind of odd Scooby Gang vibes. I don't know if that's the correct thing, because they're not always together. They do research things separately, but they're definitely a tight-knit little working crew, and I really love it. I love the series. Also, if you do read this, you need to make sure that you have a physical copy so you can look at all the details on the covers, because that's why I own the series. Not only do I love it and I want to reread it, but having the physical copies and being able to look at all the little details and knowing exactly what happens in the story that represents the details in the cover, it's just absolutely phenomenal. Next is fantasy horror, and I have had such a fun time diving into this. I want to get more into this genre in this year, and I have started, and that book will be mentioned, but before I start with that, I'll start with the good, and I'm gonna say The Pale House Devils is the one that I am picking for this. I think this was the one I struggled the most with separating the good with the for everybody, because I really think The Pale House Devils would be good for a multitude of readers. The reason I'm not putting it in the for everybody category is because it does lean more horror. And I know that some people, that's just not their vibe. The other book that I have for everybody leans more fantasy, and so that's really the separation here. I don't think that this has an issue with it that people would have, other than it is heavier on the horror-esque features. This features 2 main characters. I think they are deemed detectives in the book. I can't exactly remember their titles, but one of them is dead and one of them is alive, and they go around and solve mysteries together. And so I guess this is also a mystery genre blend as well. And they're definitely a ragtag little group of individuals. Definitely found family vibes with the 2 of them. They're silly, they're crass, and they get hired to come to a haunted house, hence the horror elements, and try and figure out how to unhaunt the house. But a lot of the book is about their journey there, figuring out some information. It's very short as well, but they interact with some people on the way to the haunted house to try and figure out the information that they need in order to solve this mystery and prevent, this house from being haunted anymore. I really liked it. I thought it was really fun. As far as the bad for this category, I hate to do this because I love this author, but I'm gonna have to say The Crane Husband. This was weird and literary and boring. I'm so sorry. I love this author's middle grade works. This is the same author. Kelly Barnhill wrote The Girl Who Drank the Moon, Ogress and the Orphans, or Orphans and the Ogress, however they're listed. And then she also wrote Ironheart, maybe. I can't remember what the third one. Iron Violet. There's another book that I read by her that was also very sweet, that was in middle grade. I just don't know. I've also read When We Were Dragons, which was fine. It was better than this, for sure. But I just don't know that the adult works of Kelly Barnhill are for me. The Crane Husband, if you haven't heard of it, you follow a main character who is a young girl. I can't remember exactly how old she is, but she's taking care of her younger sibling, and they are in a neglectful household, to say the least. Her mother is an awful human being who is an artist who is doing some artwork out in the barn, but essentially leaves her girls to do nothing. They're destitute. They don't have a lot of money, and her mom brings men home frequently and doesn't necessarily think about the ramifications that has for her daughter. One of the men that she brings home happens to be a crane. And there is just this ominous vibe with the crane. It's very strange, and it honestly is, I don't like to read about bleak storylines, and this whole story, that is what it is. The entire time, even the ending, it's not happy. None of it. None of it is happy. It's about a neglectful human being who has 2 children, who doesn't care, and the children are just trying to survive. And while I absolutely know that that happens, and I'm sure that there were some really good themes and things that needed to be discussed in this book, it's just not for me. The book that I'm going to say is for everybody is The Doll Makers. I do think that this leans more fantasy than horror. And I also think, though, that if you are a fantasy reader, if your primary genre is fantasy, you're going to really love the world that is created in this. And even though this is a standalone, the author has said that this is a standalone, the world in this book is going to be expanded upon in future books, which I'm very excited about. But this story, if you guys haven't heard me talk about it, you are following a main character whose name I can't remember at the moment, but she has trained her entire life to become a doll maker because of various things that have happened in her childhood. We are in a kingdom where dolls are used as art and children's toys, but they're also used as war machines. So you have all these different levels of doll making, and the top level, or kind of the most respected level, is the doll makers who can make these war machines. And they go out and hunt and kill the Shad, who are these creatures that come out of the woods and have murdered numerous people, have caused havoc in a whole bunch of towns. And so the doll makers are also renowned because they're the ones who are protecting the realm that we are in. And so this girl has trained her entire life to be a doll maker. She wants to make warriors, and she is told no. She is told that she can be an artisan and create the artistic dolls, but not the warrior dolls. And she goes off on a mission to prove that she can create the type of dolls that she wants. She is not a good person at the beginning of this book. She's kind of a little bit of a spoiled brat, which I found fascinating to follow someone that I really don't enjoy. I don't read that a lot, but I do find that if a storyline can win me over, even for a character who I'm not necessarily in love with, I love the book even more. And this character does have an arc, but I still think that there are definitely some flaws that are explored within this. The kingdom is just so intricate, and we have like these sprawling moments where we learn about the kingdoms around this nation as well, that I know is where the series or the author is going to take future books. But I just absolutely love this. I thought it was fantastic, but you have the horror elements within the dolls, the really gruesome acts that they do, how they look. It's definitely has moments spread throughout. So I think this one is definitely going to hit a broader audience. At least I hope, because I want more people to read it. Fantasy romance is the next genre blend, and you might be thinking, Danny, why are you doing this to yourself? And I don't know, my friends, But I do have a good, a bad, and a for everyone for this category, and I think you should be proud of me because I think my selections are excellent. The for good is going to be The Maid and the Crocodile. This is by Jordan Fueco, who wrote the Raybearer series, which I do recommend reading first, which is why this one is in the for good category and not the for everybody category, because you are going to have a little bit of a commitment because you have to read the Raybearer duology really to get the impact of The Maid and the Crocodile. It can be read as a standalone, but you're going to miss some of the kingdom dynamics and what's happening in the bigger scheme of things within the story, so I just wouldn't recommend it. In this book, you follow our main character, and I can't remember her name either, but she is a maid, and she has an ability to eat curses. And so essentially what that means is everybody has magic dust that they leave in places, and that dust can have a negative ramification if you have curses or bad luck or whatever. And if you do have a curse, she can come and clean up the dust and give you a little bit of, alleviate you a little bit of your ailment of being cursed. It does come back, but anyway, that's just details throughout the story. And she ends up coming into contact with the crocodile, which is one of the kind of local folklore gods that is in this neighborhood. He is known to eat girls that disappear when they're taken to him. And so she kind of treads lightly, but she gets intermingled with him. And it is the love story between the two of them. And I just think that it's absolutely fantastic. The language in it is superb. Reading this, it gave me goosebumps. I want to own this book. I liked Raybearer, but this book makes me want to own all of the Raybearer duology and this one because I want to reread it and live in Jordan Fueco's world again. The bad book in this category is one that I actually just finished, and that is Fang Fiction. This is a fantasy romance featuring two main characters, but one really main character who is struggling with trauma in her life. So definitely check trigger warnings if you are going to check this one out. But she ends up finding out through various items that there is a vampire, a real vampire in New York City where she lives, and that vampire needs her help. Well, that vampire is also in a storybook, like in a fictional novel, a romance novel that her and her roommate have been obsessed, or her and her friend have been obsessed with since they were in college. And so you also get to learn about why there is a story written about this vampire who everyone thinks, is a fictional character and they're actually real. I thought this was going to be fascinating. I did not enjoy the characters. At first, I thought it was fun and just kind of like a palate cleanser, but I don't like how trauma was handled in this story. It definitely felt like an afterthought at the end, and I hate to say that because it does sound like in the author's note and in the interviews that happened at the end of the book that the author was trying to be intentional. It just didn't work for me how it was handled in the book. It did feel very much like it was something that could be conquered in one moment in time, and I don't love that thought process. I also just thought the dialogue was a little cringy, which does happen to me a lot in romance books, so take that with a grain of salt. And yeah, that was kind of my experience with that book. I thought it was going to be really fun. I do love the thought process and the concept of characters from fictional worlds coming out into the real world, which isn't necessarily what happened in this book, but I just like that concept in stories, and it didn't work here. A fantasy romance that I can recommend to everybody, and I have recommended to everybody, is Paladin's Grace. I would also say that this has some horror represented in it as well, but it is primarily known as a fantasy romance. And this is one of T. Kingfisher's books, which is why I think it's for everybody, because I do think that T. Kingfisher has a very broad reading audience or reading potential. And the banter in these books, because this is a series, the banter is just top notch. I love it. In this, we have our two main characters, Grace and Stephen. Stephen is a paladin of a lost god. His god has died. It has caused him immense trauma, and he is dealing with the ramifications of that. Grace has her own trauma in her past that she's dealing with, and she gets involved in kingdom politics, and Stephen kind of has to help her. There's also some weird mystery going on in the kingdom, people being beheaded, and the city is no longer safe, so they have to deal with that. It's a very sweet story of two individuals who are very awkward together, so if you don't like awkward moments, maybe this isn't for you, but I just have absolutely loved the Saints of Steel series. Next genre blend, I have historical fantasy, and I did try with my recommendations to not give a fantasy that is Victorian era, because I know that that's very common, and so I tried to go out of that box a little bit. For the book that I'm going to say is the good in this category, but maybe not for everybody, is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I know that this might be a little dumb, I guess, of me to say that this isn't for everybody, because this book was absolutely, it blew people out of the water when it first came out, and it was very popular. But since then, since its debut, I have found lots of people who really don't jive with this book because of how plotless it is and how romanticized and slow the storyline is. So I will say that, and that's why I put it in this category. If you haven't heard of this story, which I kind of doubt, but I'm going to tell you the synopsis anyway, because this is one of my all-time favorite books. You follow Addie LaRue, who at the very beginning of this story makes a deal with a dark figure to live forever. But the caveat is, as she's living forever, no one can remember her name and no one can remember her. And so this is a story of her journey. She makes a deal for a reason. I'm not going to give you that detail, but you follow her traveling through the centuries and living forever as a forgotten human being, and how that impacts her, how she gets by when there are all these things that you don't think about it being important for someone to just remember your face and remember that they've interacted with you. And I just think it's a beautiful story. I love every minute of it. I've reread it several times, and I would recommend it to everybody, but I know that it's not for everybody. The bad book in this category for me is going to be The Peculiar Garden of Harriet Hunt, which I really wanted to love, but I just didn't, friends. We follow Harriet Hunt, who lives with her father in a mansion. This one actually might be Victorian era. Maybe I'm wrong. I can't remember, but it's probably the closest to those vibes. She is living in a mansion, and she is essentially not allowed. She's a woman in a society that does not allow women to own property, and her father goes missing. And so she's trying to figure out how to keep her estate while her father is away, because she has no idea where he has gone. She also has this problem with having a garden that is a little bit sentient, and no one knows. It's not a world where magic is frequent or that people realize magic exists, and so she is trying to hide that while also hiding the fact that her father is missing so she can keep her home. And I really wanted this story to be an opportunity for Harriet to grow and for her to gain her independence, and that's not really what happens at all. I love the premise, the execution wasn't there for me. For everybody that I have for historical fantasy is The Adventures of Amina al-Sarafi. I think that this book is fantastic, and it did make a really big splash when it first came out, but I think that since then it's kind of become a little bit of a sleeper, and I want it to stay in the limelight because I absolutely love this story. We follow Amina, who is a retired pirate. She is in her late 40s, early 50s in the start of this book, and she has retired from the game because she has a young daughter and a mother that she is taking care of, and she wants to make sure that she can keep them safe. But she is pulled back into pirating and has to kind of get the gang back together because one of her friends has had someone taken from them, and they call Amina in to retrieve them. So it is such a fun story. Amina has a really kind of rough and gruff, not rough and gruff, maybe that's not the right words to describe her. Very sassy and snarky, I guess, is how I would describe her, and she can definitely hold her own. I had a lot of fun. It also has an element, kind of like a podcast feel. Someone is recording her stories, and I loved that. The little times where the fourth wall would be broken. It's just very good, and I want more people to read it. The last genre blend I have for you guys is fantasy sci-fi, and this has been a genre that I have been exploring a little bit recently, and I've really enjoyed my time with it. The one that I love, but I know it's not for everybody, but I'm still gonna recommend it, is The Failures. I've talked about this a lot on my channel recently because it is a book that kind of blew me out of the water, one that I thought I was gonna enjoy, but not quite as much as I did. It's fantastic, but the reason I don't think it's for everybody is because it is quite complex, and there is definitely some elements in here that are very confusing at the beginning. You're not really going to understand what's going on or how things fit together until the end of the book, but when you do, it's amazing. I love it, and it will keep your attention throughout the entire book. You have 5 different POVs that you're following that all have something to do with this mountain where human civilization has moved underground because of something that has happened, and light is a precious commodity that is made by magic, but that magic is dwindling. And as the lights dwindle, the civilization has had to grow closer and closer and closer together, which has caused some issues. And you are following this group of individuals who you know has some type of leadership. You don't know if they're nefarious, if they're for the good of people. You kind of are up in the air about that, and they are making some decisions. You also have a crew of individuals who are very famous for something they did in their past, and they're just trying to make do, but they get involved in some of the kingdom dynamics that are happening. You also follow 2 young boys growing up, learning about magic and their lives in general. And then you have a really dark, nefarious figure that is in the world doing things, and you're not sure why. They're chasing someone, but you don't know exactly what that person has done. And on page, they're super ominous. So I really have enjoyed this, but I do recognize that it might not be for everybody because of how complex it is, because of how much attention you have to pay to a lot of the details that are given. I think this is going to be really fun upon reread. The one that I'm going to say is the bad is Sleeping Giants, which I know a lot of people have enjoyed, but to be honest, I just found this book boring. I thought I was going to love it because it does have the mixed media element where the entire story is told in interview format, but I found that made it super dry. The person who is conducting the interviews is giving very little information away, and I just didn't care about any of the characters because it's such a formulaic way of asking questions and then them answering questions. There's not a lot of feeling or drive in the story for me. If you haven't heard of this book, you are following the discovery of this giant hand is discovered. And I haven't read this in a while, and I don't know how much of it is spoilers, but I know that that's at the very beginning of the book, is they find a giant hand, and you're trying to figure out what this giant hand came from. And you know that there's something to do with the government involved. You're following a whole bunch of different scientists being interviewed, and you know some event has happened that they're interviewing you for, or interviewing the characters for. I don't know. I do know that a lot of people have loved it, so take this with a grain of salt. Maybe you will absolutely enjoy the series. I just couldn't vibe with it. I was super disconnected the entire time. The one I would say is for everybody is Starter Villain by John Scalzi. I think this is so fun and quirky, and it's short, that if you're just wanting to give sci-fi fantasy a try and you're not exactly sure where to start, I would say that this is a good place. If you don't like whimsy, maybe not this, although I do think that you could probably, I don't think this is super whimsical because I am someone who doesn't really enjoy whimsy. In this, you follow our main character whose uncle has just passed. He was not someone who was in his uncle's life, but his uncle has bequeathed to him his entire estate, which is a lot. It makes him a very rich man and gets him involved in some things that he did not realize his uncle was involved in. And I don't know how much I want to give you because it's such a short book. There are obviously cat characters that have something to do with the storyline. You also have kind of an underbelly that you learn about. There are so many hysterical moments in this of our character kind of being a little bit of a bumbling fool, which I normally don't love, but he's also very endearing. I just found this story really, really funny, really fun, really fast-paced, wildly not adventurous, it's not the right word, kind of explosive at the end. So much happens, and I just think it's a lot of fun. So I do think that in general, this is going to have a really broad audience. Those are my recommendations and anti-recommendations for fantasy genre blends. I hope that you found something that you find interesting and that you might give a try. If you have recommendations for me, please leave those in the comments down below. I am always adding to my TBR for fantasy genre blends, so please do that. If you are not feeling chatty but you still want to let me know that you are here, just leave me a cat emoji in the comments down below so I know that you're with me. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you have a lovely evening, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!